Hi, my name is Austin Parle, and this presentation is going to be based on the service learning that I chose to do this semester. So, the service learning partner that I chose to volunteer for was Bridgeway Healthcare and Hospice, which is a full service licensed and certified hospice company that was established in 2012. Bridgeway is unique in that it is actually locally owned and operated in three separate locations in Louisiana, and those include Baton Rouge, Lafayette, as well as Plaquemine. The one that I went to was the one off of American Way in Baton Rouge. Bridgeway is also staffed by hospice nurses who have over 25 years of experience. Their team is very committed to patient care and have a lot of passion for hospice. Bridgeway's care and services are also focused on enhancing overall quality of life while treating symptoms linked to the hospice diagnosis. Their staff can be there for patients to offer comfort and support when they approach the end of life, when modern medicine and therapy can no longer be an option. So, Bridgeway Hospice's mission is to offer specialized care to patients and their families as they approach the end of life. They try to create moments that matter. This can be seen in the events they put together for the community and building a strong connection to their patients. Bridgeway Hospice also takes great pride in making a difference in the lives of patients and their loved ones. Bridgeway develops a positive outlook on hospice care and helps patients and families to be more accepting of the future. They're dedicated to the people that they serve, the healthcare professionals that they work with, as well as doctors and other providers because of their expertise in care for others. Providing compassionate care to the patients is at the center of Bridgeway Hospice's mission. Now I wanted to talk about how my experience at Bridgeway Hospice connects to science. And this is really through the services that they provide as a healthcare team and how healthcare professionals maximize comfort for a person who is terminally ill. And this is done by reducing pain and addressing physical, psychological, social, and spiritual needs. The majority of hospice patients have cancer, although other conditions such as heart disease, dementia, and kidney failure also exist. Hospice care lessens the strain on the family, lowers the risk that the family may experience complicated grieving, and also helps family members get ready for their loved one's passing. Now, the patient can continue to feel safe, secure, and comfortable in a familiar setting. The hospice staff, the patient's family, and the doctor can work together to develop a care plan that is effective for everyone. Overall, hospice care offers numerous advantages to both the dying person and the remaining family members. According to one study, bereaved spouses of patients who got hospice care reported fewer depressive symptoms than those of patients who did not. These findings add to the earlier research that demonstrates that numerous advantages hospice care offers to all parties. Essentially, hospice patients are less likely to be hospitalized, less likely to be committed in an intensive care unit, and less likely to undergo invasive procedures in the final weeks of their life. They are also less likely to endure physical and emotional distress. Hospice patients also report being significantly more pleased with the care received by their loved ones. So, for my vocation and mission, generally speaking, my vocation has always been about helping others through being a medical professional as well as being a supportive figure for those who need a path to follow. The reason that Bridgeway Hospice piqued my interest was because I initially wanted to experience healthcare from a different perspective. And going into this, I did not know what to expect, but after being able to volunteer at Bridgeway Hospice, my perspective of hospice care has been greatly affected. I personally have experienced losing loved ones who were both in and out of hospice care. And after experiencing as a volunteer to what the Bridgeway Hospice staff does on like a regular day basis, it showed me the amount of support and care that they give towards both the patients and families. I would say that my vocation has evolved over the course of the semester in the sense that I want to strive to be able to be a more compassionate individual who is also capable of looking at more than what is on the surface. In the future, I want to be able to help patients not only with their physical pain, but also the emotional pain that can sometimes come with it, just like the medical professionals do at Bridgeway. So the next thing I wanted to talk about were the impacts that I made while I was at Bridgeway Hospice, and the first one is going to be something more of just an impact, not something that was measurable, but it was important to me, so I did want to talk about it. And it was being there and just talking to the patients and being there for a sense of comfort for them. And a lot of times in these situations, the patients just enjoy to have a conversation with the person that isn't medically staffed there. And each of them have their own special personality along with their own interesting stories from, when they were young up until the point they were received at Bridgeway. And having these conversations with them while also smiling and laughing are very enjoyable. And that experience to me was very life-changing. Now, moving on to the measured impact that I did want to talk about, and that was providing advertising for one of their events that they were planning later in April. And this event is called Celebration of Life, which is open to the public. I think the best way to describe it is a way to celebrate those who have passed away recently and for those who lost loved ones, and it's just a way of reminiscing the good moments they had with them. And the way it works is essentially the staff at Bridgeway Hospice provides a PowerPoint with each slide depicting a patient or loved one who has passed, and then the families and those who knew them gather together to honor their distinctive life. Personally, I think I did make a significant impact on this as well because I did place 35 signs around the local areas from Baton Rouge to Prairieville. I will talk about it later, but I do have my own personal opinion about the signs themselves and how maybe changing them will also increase awareness of hospice itself. Moving on to the problems that I noticed while volunteering at Bridgeway Hospice. So one of the things was the biggest problem, and not only Bridgeway faces, but other hospice facilities as well, and that is just a common misconception and the associated unfavorable public view of hospice and palliative care. This is usually due to the lack of education about hospice care and the benefits that it provides. This can frequently act as a major barrier to providing the appropriate degree of care at the appropriate time. Essentially, hospice care is seen as a place where you go to die by the public, and they disregard any benefits that it can provide to those that are terminally ill. Palliative care is actually a type of medical care that treats chronic illnesses by managing their discomfort, symptoms, and side effects. It can be administered at any age and is provided at all phases of the disease. This means that patients that are terminally ill will receive palliative care from hospice facilities or other medical personnel and benefit from that because it helps lessen the pain as well as physical and psychological problems. And so the other problem that I happened to notice while I was volunteering was at Bridgeway was that there was a lack of other volunteers. And I think the lack of volunteers might be due to the previous problem that hospice care has, which is like common misconceptions and people who are not taught the benefits of hospice care and how they will just avoid volunteering because they feel uncomfortable with the experience. The general public sees death from a negative perception and will most likely not participate. Overall, this leads to a lack of volunteer power. I feel like this becomes especially more true when school is not in session due to the fact that many volunteers that are participating are doing so because they are also doing it for school rather than their own free will. After participating and volunteering for the Bridgeway, I personally am motivated to keep volunteering because of the good atmosphere and positivity that both the staff and patients have. The biggest question, and something that we can also measure, is how to increase public awareness of Bridgeway Hospice. Now, this is also going to be incorporating the increase in the amount of volunteers, as well as, having a more positive outlook from the community itself. This brings me to my hypothesis and prediction, and that is with awareness and education about hospice through public-friendly events, the public would be more accepting and the amount of volunteers would increase. And when I'm talking about public-friendly events, I'm talking about things like banquets or something friendly for the public to join. Something like that, or like if you're in Louisiana, crawfish boils, stuff like that. And the reason for this is that, like as I mentioned before, currently the outlook of hospice care from the public eye is usually negative. It is seen as a place to go die and nothing more. But in reality, it is something that truly supports those in their final moments. So I think with the usage of advertisements and education through these public-friendly events, this could increase the positive perception of hospice, and this in turn can improve the amount of volunteers that want to work there as well. So now time for the solution and experimental design for these problems. And that's going to be through advertising for any events that might be done by Bridgeway Hospice. And like I said earlier, I did participate in placing signs around our local areas to raise awareness for one of the events that Bridgeway Hospice was doing later this month. However, there are only so many signs that can be placed in such a large area. And on top of that, in my personal opinion, the signs could have been larger to get attention of more people. But the biggest thing was that I think a lack of awareness of what hospice does may also be making the signs less effective. And this made me think that Bridgeway should host an event that invites the general public to something such as a banquet or other activity, like a public-friendly event. And that'll make them want to come, and in doing so, they can also be educated and taught about what hospice care really does and the benefits that it provides. This is going to be a continuation of the experimental design section, in which we're going to collect data on 2 groups of participants during the hospice-sponsored events. Afterwards, we're going to be using questionnaires to test the effectiveness of each event. Now, the main focus of this experimental design is to be focusing on the public-friendly events and their effectiveness with the participants. Now, the first category is going to be participants exposed to public-friendly events with education. And what I mean by with education is that possibly having a PowerPoint during a banquet or having newsletters on the table. The next category is going to be participants exposed to normal hospice events with no education. And now getting to the analysis of this experimental design, and its purpose is going to be measuring the impact of education and advertisement that the public-friendly events have compared to the normal sponsored hospice events. And as you can see in the categories, I separated it into 8 separate categories. Now, 4 of those categories are going to be in the public-friendly events, and 4 of those categories are going to be in the normal sponsored events by hospice. And essentially what it's going to be looking at is who wants to volunteer, who doesn't want to volunteer, and what type of outlooks that the participants have after the event has occurred. So the most likely conclusion for this experimental design is that there's going to be an increase in volunteers and positive outlooks due to these public-friendly events. This can also be associated with the education that is provided from them. Overall, this actually does show that there's a change of perception from the public view, and it gives a chance to show what Bridgeway Hospice really sets out to do. Now, I also wanted to talk about some of the limitations that could cause some issues. The first limitation is going to be that some people, no matter what education is taught to them, they will still be uncomfortable with the idea of death. Now, this is an understandable limitation due to the fact that there are some cultures that view death differently than others. This limitation cannot be avoided because it involves changing somebody's cultural views and beliefs. Now, the other limitation that this study would face would be limited funding for advertisement. Even though it is a hospice corporation, Bridgeway is still limited to the amount of money that it can spend on advertising for events and other occasions, due to also having to spend money to support the patients and their daily needs. Now, this is also something that cannot be avoided unless there was a way for support through donations and from the community. This is the reference that I used for this presentation. And finally, I just wanted to thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.